The exclusive community of Evergreen Hills was known for its manicured lawns, sprawling mansions, and the successful professionals who called it home. Among its residents, few were as respected and admired as Natalie Prescott. At 42, Natalie was a partner at one of the city's top law firms, specializing in corporate mergers and acquisitions. Her reputation for razor-sharp intellect and unwavering determination had earned her both the fear and respect of her colleagues and opponents alike. Natalie's home life appeared equally perfect. Her husband, Dr. Benjamin Prescott, was a renowned pediatric surgeon at the city's most prestigious hospital. Their two children, 14-year-old Sophia and 11-year-old Max, were top students at the elite Evergreen Academy. From the outside, the Prescotts seemed to have it all: success, wealth, and a picture-perfect family. However, beneath the polished exterior, cracks had begun to form in Natalie's carefully constructed world. The demands of her high-pressure job left her feeling increasingly isolated and unfulfilled. Nights spent poring over legal documents had replaced intimate dinners with Benjamin, and weekends once dedicated to family outings were now consumed by work commitments. It was on a crisp autumn evening in September 2022 that Natalie's life took an unexpected turn. The annual Evergreen Hills charity auction, a black-tie affair that brought together the community's elite, was in full swing at the opulent Grand Oaks Hotel. Natalie, stunning in a form-fitting black gown, circulated through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with clients and neighbors. As she made her way to the bar for a much-needed glass of champagne, Natalie's gaze fell upon a painting that stopped her in her tracks. The canvas depicted a solitary woman standing on a stormy beach, her face turned away from the viewer. Something about the piece spoke to Natalie, evoking a sense of loneliness and yearning that resonated deeply within her. Lost in contemplation, Natalie didn't notice the young man who approached until he spoke. "I see you found my little contribution to the evening," he said, his voice warm and slightly amused. Natalie turned to find herself face to face with a man who looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s. He had tousled dark hair, intense green eyes, and a boyish grin that seemed at odds with the world-weary expression in his eyes. "You're the artist?" Natalie asked, surprised. The man nodded, extending his hand. "Ethan Reeves," he introduced himself. "And you must be Natalie Prescott. I've heard a lot about you." Natalie raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "All good things, I hope," she replied with a smile. Ethan's grin widened. "Mostly terrifying, actually. You have quite the reputation in the courtroom." As they talked, Natalie found herself drawn to Ethan's easy charm and quick wit. He was refreshingly different from the polished professionals she usually encountered. When he suggested they step outside for some fresh air, Natalie agreed without hesitation, ignoring the small voice in the back of her mind that warned her she was treading on dangerous ground. On the hotel's terrace, overlooking the twinkling lights of the city below, Ethan and Natalie's conversation deepened. He told her about his struggles as an artist, the odd jobs he took to make ends meet, and his dreams of making it big in the art world. Natalie, in turn, found herself opening up about the pressures of her job and the growing sense of disconnection she felt from her family and herself. As the night wore on, Natalie became increasingly aware of the electricity building between them. When Ethan's hand brushed against hers, she felt a jolt of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. It was only when her phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin asking when she'd be home that Natalie snapped back to reality. Flustered and guilty, Natalie made her excuses and prepared to leave. As she turned to go, Ethan caught her hand. "I'd like to see you again," he said softly. Natalie knew she should refuse, but instead, she heard herself agreeing to meet him for coffee the following week. As Natalie drove home that night, her mind raced with conflicting emotions. She told herself it was harmless, just coffee with a fascinating new acquaintance. But deep down, she knew she was standing on the precipice of something that could shatter the life she had so carefully built. Little did Natalie know that this chance encounter with Ethan Reeves would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to passion, betrayal, and ultimately, tragedy. The carefully constructed facade of her perfect life was about to crumble, revealing the cracks and fissures that had been there all along. In the weeks that followed, Natalie found herself drawn deeper into Ethan's world. Their coffee meetings became more frequent, evolving into long walks in secluded parks and clandestine dinners in out-of-the-way restaurants. Natalie told herself she was simply mentoring a struggling young artist, but she couldn't deny the thrill she felt every time Ethan's name appeared on her phone. As autumn turned to winter, Natalie's home life grew increasingly strained. Benjamin, consumed by a demanding new research project, barely noticed his wife's distraction. Sophia and Max, caught up in their own adolescent dramas, seemed to need her less and less. Natalie found herself fabricating work emergencies to explain her absences, the lies slipping from her tongue with alarming ease. It was during a particularly heated argument with Benjamin over her long hours that Natalie finally crossed the line she had been tiptoeing around for months. She stormed out of the house, driving aimlessly through the rain-slicked streets until she found herself outside Ethan's modest apartment in a decidedly less affluent part of town. Ethan opened the door, his eyes widening in surprise at the sight of Natalie, rain-soaked and trembling on his doorstep. I shouldn't be here," Natalie whispered, even as she stepped inside. What followed was a night of passion that left Natalie both exhilarated and racked with guilt. As their affair intensified, Natalie began to see glimpses of a darker side to Ethan. His mood could shift dramatically, from charming and attentive to brooding and possessive. He became increasingly demanding of her time, growing angry when she couldn't meet him at a moment's notice. One evening, as they lay tangled in the sheets of a hotel room, Ethan began to open up about his past. He spoke of a troubled childhood, bouncing between foster homes after his mother's death from a drug overdose. He admitted to struggles with depression and substance abuse, confessing that his art was the only thing that kept him grounded. Natalie, moved by his vulnerability, found herself sharing her own insecurities, her fear of failure, the growing distance in her marriage, her worry that she was losing touch with her children. In those moments of raw honesty, their connection deepened, transcending the physical attraction that had initially drawn them together. However, as winter gave way to spring, Natalie began to feel the weight of her double life bearing down on her. The thrill of sneaking around was fading, replaced by constant anxiety and guilt. She found herself snapping at her children over minor infractions, unable to concentrate at work and lying awake at night, torn between her growing feelings for Ethan and her loyalty to her family. The situation came to a head in April when Natalie missed Sophia's piano recital due to a rendezvous with Ethan. The hurt in her daughter's eyes when Natalie tried to apologize the next day was a wake-up call. Realizing she was on the verge of losing everything that truly mattered, Natalie made the painful decision to end the affair. When she met Ethan at their usual cafe to break the news, his reaction caught her off guard. Instead of the understanding she had hoped for, Ethan flew into a rage. He accused her of using him, of being just like everyone else who had abandoned him. As his voice rose, drawing stares from other patrons, Natalie fled the cafe, shaken by the intensity of his anger. In the days that followed, Natalie threw herself into repairing her relationships at home. She took time off work, planned family outings, and made a concerted effort to reconnect with Benjamin. For a while, it seemed as though she might be able to put the affair behind her and salvage her marriage. But Ethan wasn't willing to let go so easily. He began calling and texting incessantly, alternating between passionate declarations of love and veiled threats. When Natalie blocked his number, she started receiving anonymous bouquets of her favorite flowers at her office, a reminder that he knew her routines, her preferences, her vulnerabilities. As Ethan's behavior grew more erratic, Natalie found herself looking over her shoulder constantly, jumping at every unexpected sound. She considered confessing everything to Benjamin, but fear held her back. Fear of losing her family, her reputation, everything she had worked so hard to achieve. What Natalie didn't realize was that her silence was leading her down a path that would end in tragedy. Ethan's obsession was reaching a dangerous tipping point, and the carefully compartmentalized worlds Natalie had been navigating were about to collide in a way that would leave no one unscathed. As spring bloomed into summer, Natalie's anxiety reached a fever pitch. Ethan's behavior had escalated from persistent to alarming. She began noticing his car parked on her street at odd hours, and one morning she found a sketch of herself sleeping taped to her office window, a chilling reminder of Ethan's artistic talent and his growing instability. Desperate for help, but unwilling to involve the police for fear of exposure, Natalie confided in her longtime friend and colleague, Marcus Delgado. Marcus, a former prosecutor turned private investigator, listened to Natalie's story with growing concern. He told her, "Natalie, this isn't just an ex-lover who can't let go. Ethan's behavior is showing signs of dangerous obsession. You need to take this seriously." With Marcus's help, Natalie began documenting Ethan's actions and strengthening her home security. She warned her children to be vigilant and made excuses to Benjamin about a stalker client to explain the new alarm system. The constant vigilance took its toll, leaving Natalie jumpy and irritable. Meanwhile, oblivious to the real source of his wife's distress, Benjamin attributed Natalie's changed behavior to work stress. He suggested they take a family vacation to their lake house, hoping some time away would help Natalie relax. Natalie agreed, desperate for an escape from the mounting tension. The Prescott family arrived at their secluded lake house on a warm Friday evening in July. As they unpacked the car, Natalie felt herself beginning to unwind for the first time in months. The familiar scent of pine and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore brought back happy memories of summers past. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Natalie and Benjamin sat on the deck, sharing a bottle of wine. In the soft glow of the porch light, Natalie found herself studying her husband's face, the laugh lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his hair. A wave of affection and guilt washed over her. She opened her mouth on the verge of confessing everything, when a noise from the woods caught her attention. Benjamin, noticing her sudden tension, asked, "What's wrong?" Natalie shook her head, forcing a smile. "Nothing," she lied. "Just a raccoon, probably." But as they headed inside, Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The next day passed uneventfully, filled with swimming, board games, and family laughter. Natalie began to think she had imagined the disturbance, that perhaps she was finally free of Ethan's shadow. But as she stood in the kitchen preparing dinner, she glanced out the window and her blood ran cold. There, half hidden behind a tree at the edge of the property, stood a familiar figure. Natalie's first instinct was to alert Benjamin, but he and the children had taken the boat out for a sunset cruise. She was alone in the Hampsos. With shaking hands, she reached for her phone to call Marcus, only to find the battery dead. The landline, when she tried it, was ominously silent. A knock at the door made Natalie jump. Ethan's voice, deceptively calm, carried through the wood. "I know you're in there, Natalie. We need to talk." Frantically, Natalie searched for a weapon, her hand closing around a heavy cast-iron skillet. She backed away from the door, her heart pounding. "Go away, Ethan!" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've called the police. They're on their way." Ethan's laugh sent chills down her spine. "No, you haven't," he said. "Your phone's dead, remember? I made sure of that. Quite easy to jam signals out here in the woods." The sound of breaking glass from the back of the house told Natalie that Ethan had found another way in. She ran for the stairs, hoping to barricade herself in one of the bedrooms until Benjamin returned. But Ethan was faster, catching up to her in the upstairs hallway. "Why are you doing this?" Natalie gasped, brandishing the skillet. Ethan's eyes, once so captivating, now burned with a manic intensity. "Because you're mine," he snarled. "You can't just throw me away like everyone else." As Ethan lunged forward, Natalie swung the skillet with all her might. There was a sickening thud as it connected with Ethan's head, and he crumpled to the floor. Natalie stood frozen, the skillet slipping from her numb fingers. Blood began to pool around Ethan's motionless form. The sound of the boat returning jolted Natalie back to reality. In a daze, she stumbled down the stairs and out onto the dock. Benjamin, seeing her pale, shocked face, immediately knew something was wrong. "Natalie, what happened?" he asked, alarm evident in his voice. As the full weight of what had transpired hit her, Natalie burst into tears. Between sobs, the whole story came pouring out. The affair, Ethan's obsession, and the violent confrontation. Benjamin listened in stunned silence, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. When Natalie finished, Benjamin's first words were not what she expected. "We need to call the police," he said grimly. "But first, we need to get the kids out of here." As Benjamin ushered the confused and frightened children to the car, Natalie sank to her knees on the dock, the idyllic lake scene now forever tainted by the tragedy that had unfolded. She knew that whatever happened next, her life would never be the same. The perfect facade she had worked so hard to maintain had finally shattered, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions and the uncertain future that lay ahead. The following hours passed in a blur of flashing lights, police sirens, and endless questions. Detective Laura Simmons, a seasoned investigator with the state police, took charge of the scene. She listened to Natalie's story with a mix of sympathy and skepticism, her keen eyes noting every detail of Natalie's demeanor and the crime scene. Ethan, barely clinging to life, was airlifted to the nearest trauma center. The Prescott family, shell-shocked and silent, was escorted to a local hotel for the night. As dawn broke, bringing with it the harsh reality of the situation, Natalie found herself sitting across from Detective Simmons in a stark interrogation room at the local police station. "Mrs. Prescott," Simmons began, her tone professional but not unkind, "I need you to walk me through everything again. Every detail matters." Natalie, exhausted and numb, recounted the events once more. As she spoke, she could see the doubt creeping into Simmons's expression. "You understand how this looks, don't you?" Simmons said finally. "A successful lawyer caught in an affair with a younger man claims self-defense when he turns up nearly dead at her vacation home. It's a tough sell, especially given the, shall we say, disparity in your sizes." Natalie felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the precariousness of her situation. "I'm telling you the truth," she insisted, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. "Ethan had become unstable, dangerous. I feared for my life." As the investigation unfolded over the following weeks, Natalie's world continued to crumble. She was placed on indefinite leave from her firm, her spotless reputation now tarnished by scandal. Benjamin, struggling to come to terms with her betrayal, moved out of their home, taking the children with him. Ethan, who had survived the attack but suffered severe brain damage, was unable to provide his version of events. His family, outraged by what they saw as Natalie taking advantage of a troubled young man, pushed for the harshest possible charges. The media circus that ensued was relentless. Natalie's face was splashed across newspapers and TV screens, her past scrutinized for any hint of impropriety. Old acquaintances came forward with stories, some true, some embellished, all damaging. The community that had once revered her now shunned her, whispers and pointed looks following her wherever she went. In a surprising turn of events, it was Marcus Delgado who provided the key to Natalie's defense. His meticulous documentation of Ethan's escalating behavior, combined with records of Natalie's attempts to end contact, painted a clear picture of stalking and obsession. The trial, when it finally came, was a media sensation. The prosecution painted Natalie as a calculating adulteress who had used and discarded a vulnerable young man. The defense countered with a narrative of a woman trapped in an abusive situation, forced to fight for her life. In the end, the jury found Natalie not guilty of attempted murder, but convicted her of aggravated assault. The judge, taking into account the circumstances and Natalie's previously unblemished record, sentenced her to 2 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 1 year. As Natalie was led away in handcuffs, she caught a glimpse of Benjamin in the courtroom, his face a mixture of relief and lingering betrayal. Their eyes met briefly, a wordless exchange that spoke volumes about the past they had shared and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Natalie's time in prison was a period of profound reflection and change. She used her legal skills to help fellow inmates with their cases, finding a sense of purpose in advocating for those less fortunate. Through therapy and self-examination, she began to understand the choices that had led her to this point. Upon her release, Natalie emerged a changed woman. Her law career was over, her marriage dissolved, and her relationship with her children strained. But she was determined to rebuild her life on a foundation of honesty and integrity. In the years that followed, Natalie found a new calling as a victim's advocate, using her experience to help others trapped in abusive relationships. She wrote a book about her experiences, hoping to warn others about the dangers of secret affairs and the importance of addressing marital problems head-on. Benjamin, in time, found a way to forgive Natalie, if not forget. They developed a cordial co-parenting relationship, united in their love for their children. Sophia and Max, initially angry and confused, gradually came to understand the complexities of adult relationships and the toll that secrets can take. Ethan, permanently disabled from the attack, spent years in rehabilitation. His family eventually dropped their vendetta against Natalie, recognizing that their son's untreated mental health issues had played a significant role in the tragedy. As for Natalie, she never fully escaped the shadow of that fateful summer night. But she found a measure of peace in using her experiences to help others, and in the knowledge that even the darkest chapters of our lives can lead to growth and redemption if we're willing to face our mistakes and learn from them. The story of Natalie Prescott served as a cautionary tale in Evergreen Hills for years to come. It was a stark reminder that beneath the polished facades and manicured lawns, every family has its struggles, and that the choices we make in moments of weakness can have far-reaching consequences. But it was also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of finding meaning and purpose even in the aftermath of tragedy.